Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Warhammer 3 content. It's been a very busy day, and in this video what I want to do is talk about the Nurgle roster. We're going to check out their stats, I'm going to talk about how I've been using them through campaign and so on, my personal thoughts regarding each unit, as some people are rather curious. I've had a decent amount of time to play and it's more the case of now giving my thoughts because Nurgle is quite different. Keep in mind the roster is quite small at the moment. Obviously it should get bigger with DLC and so on, but it's very different because of its playstyle. As you are aware, Nurgle's way of recruiting is so very drastically different that you can't really put down any of the units. All of them have their uses, all of them will be available to you at certain times, and it's more of the case of how you use them and when to use them. You can't really just say, no, I'm just going to ignore these units fully because, well, that's impossible. You're going to have a bad time. I've learnt that myself the hard way, and if you've seen my campaign overview with all the mechanics and how recruitment is actually done, you'll realize, yeah, you're kind of stuck to trying to make the best out of every unit, and that means even the bad ones too. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in because there is a lot to discuss. We'll start off with the Nurglings because, well, they're a really odd unit, you know. It's technically a bunch of different little minor demons, but they kind of scrunch up together to form one unit. It's very different. This is a swarm, and hopefully Creative Assembly will expand on swarms in future content because it's something that's been wanted for a long time. These are very curious because, well, they aren't really that good to do damage unless you're playing as Kulgath, who has so many bonuses towards Nurglings that they become really tanky and they become really strong. I'm not saying to a massive degree, but keep in mind that they start off quite weak because they're here to be, well, doorstops. That's what they were in the tabletop too. You would hold down your enemy with this and wait for your other slower stuff to move around, which explains why the Nurglings themselves have a decent high speed. I've used them a lot. You're going to be getting them a lot for your campaign. Like, they are going to be the most numerous type of unit that you'll be able to recruit. But you can get them a little stronger, you can buff them up. They are more of these units that you'll recruit if you need something quick. And yeah, I kind of see it. I've been using it that way. I've been using them as doorstops too. They have that tabletop functionality, which is good because obviously you guys know that I'm more tabletop oriented. So having to use units as they were works out very well for me. I have had some armies just following around Kulgath, like one with just Nurglings. It just helps to have some extra support. They're not the best units, but like I said, they can be very useful. And considering how many you're going to be able to recruit, you're going to have to get used to them regardless, believe me. Moving on to the Plague Bearers, this is when things start to slow down. Yeah, because you're Nurgle, you're a slow-moving wall of flesh. What you will notice is that they've got an ability known as Cloud of Flies, which everyone, well, all the demons tend to have, and it just increases their melee defense when they get into combat, which obviously makes them even tankier. Now, with regards to the Plague Bearers, slow, durable, but they can take damage, they can take a lot of hits. The great thing about them is once they get into combat, they can do a lot of hits too. They're lumbering. They've always kind of been like this in lore too. It's kind of like really durable demonic zombies in a sense. They are your front line, and they're the ones that are going to be marching at the very front of your army, your very slow army, and taking most of the hits, which is something that you want them to do. They can take it, it's perfectly fine. Poison attacks will make them do a lot of damage when they get up close. Keep in mind that if you keep them healed up a little bit, they shouldn't really have too much of an issue. The Wall of Flesh tactic is more than viable with Nurgle, which is super weird when you compare it to other factions and obviously in Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2. Well, it's kind of like the zombies, but more capable of doing damage, so it kind of works out quite well, especially since the Cloud of Flies stuff will boost them up when they get into combat, well, increase their melee defense, which is what you want anyway. Because of how the Nurgle stuff works, you're going to have to get used to them too. It's something that you're going to be hearing a bit often. I'm not saying that the units are necessarily bad, but their upgraded versions themselves have better units, which we can see right here with the Exalted Plague Bearers. It's just an upgraded version, they've got better stats of course, but what makes them much more viable is their little range weapon. They barely have any ammo, and the range is only 70, yet a little bit of damage right before you get into combat, it always helps. I found these to be much more usable, much more user-friendly, and you want to get these as many as possible. Of course, you have to stack up the buildings too, which is quite expensive. Nurgle's campaign is not easy, as I've explained in the previous video, so you have to kind of know when you're going to bring out the Exalted Plague Bearers, as you don't want them to be wasted on an army which is pretty much going to go get destroyed. Well, that's more so the case with every single Nurgle unit, so yeah, you have to be a bit cautious, though when you can let them go crazy on the battlefield, they're going to do a lot of damage. I've been testing them against pretty much every faction. They hold up. They can even do some decent damage against Bloodletters, which are designed to destroy infantry. Obviously, you have to keep in mind that anything that's kind of faster, which in most cases is most stuff, will hit you from the flanks and the side, and you have to be prepared to move around. You can't bring Plague Bearers by themselves. They need to be supported. This is something really, really important. Like doom stacking and so on is possible in the game, mostly with soul grinders and so on. You could make a decent 20 stack out of just Plague Bearers, but it's not going to hold out later game. Mid game, it's still fine, depending on what you're fighting in all honesty, but it depends too. Alright, Forsaken of Nurgle, one of the recolors that we've had from previous units that we've had since, Warhammer 1. Now, you might think that I might not like these units, but surprisingly enough, I've used them a lot in a Nurgle campaign. See, they're a little faster than Plague Bearers and so on. They're also excellent shock troops, so they're able to do a decent amount of damage going around, especially when dealing with other factions. You're going to want something that can hit kind of hard and move at a decent pace without getting slowed down because it's Nurgle stuff. As a shock troop, they're fairly decent. You will replace them in the future with other stuff, but they work quite well. I'm actually really surprised myself to say this, because I haven't really used a lot of these guys. Well, barring with Tzeentch. They've definitely found some purpose, though I will say that it's kind of silly that a Forsaken still can break. In my honest opinion, they would be far more useful for Nurgle and from pretty much any other Chaos God if they were unbreakable, because they're Forsaken. They're basically mutated to the point of no turning back. And they should be. I really think that they would work out really well as unbreakable units, because sometimes you can just destroy their leadership with quite a lot of entities left and they'll just go running. That's very frustrating for something called a Forsaken. This is my only real complaint. Other than that, the unit's pretty good, and I've actually had some decent uses of it. So now we look towards another recolor, reskin, whatever you want to call them. These are the spawn of Nurgle. Very powerful, unbreakable, poison attacks, siege attackers too, but you're going to have a lot of stuff that has siege attacker anyway, so it's not too worry. They're good. They are pretty good at dealing damage. I haven't really used these too much, I'll be very honest with you. With this case, I think this is the unit throughout the whole roster which I've probably used the least. And that's mainly because for some reason I've had just the bad luck of them being aimed out a lot, which, yeah, I understand the AI will probably focus on something which it deems a threat, and this charging in forward is probably going to be that. That being said, their damage output is pretty good when you deal against hordes, and yeah, I mean, it's Chaos Spawn. We're used to these, they do a lot of damage. They can be upgraded to be better, but generally you'll start to not really want them so much once you start going for stuff like the Beasts of Nurgle and so on. Again, not saying there's no validity to the Chaos Spawn, but once you start getting the Beasts of Nurgle, you don't really want the Chaos Spawn so much. I mean, look at them. They look absolutely grim. It's kind of an, I don't know, mania type of thing. But also, look, they're armor piercing, they've got poison attacks, regeneration, they're demons too, so obviously they won't break. Well, the Chaos Spawn are unbreakable, but these also have the benefit of that slime trail debuff area, which reduces melee attack and speed of units, so you're going to want to use these mainly because they can start making stuff like, say, for example, Cornic demons, which you will face a few times. They will make them a bit weaker with less melee attack. Speed also reduces their capabilities of being able to cycle charge you too much. You'll be able to start overwhelming them with numbers, and they're just cool. I love these in the tabletop. I've absolutely love these in the tabletop. So I can't really complain about a unit that I know I'm going to have an obvious bias to, but like I said, they're useful. They can do damage. They are strong, and yeah, they're slow, but then again, everything is at this point. I have used one to go and just hold down soul grinders before in battles, so I know they can hold down their own, especially with regeneration and so on. It's the case of they'll be much better once you start buffing them up and they'll be able to do more damage. You're definitely going to want these in your army though. That debuff is going to help out. It might not be the biggest debuff, but it's still a debuff. Okay, Plague Toads of Nurgle. This is when we start getting a little bit of speed. Yeah, I know, 59. It's actually pretty fast, especially for something that's Nurgle related. It's got armor piercing, it's anti-infantry, it's poison attacks. These are your shock cavalry monster type of things. The reason why I was so surprised to see these originally on the original roster is because they were a Forge World unit and that's normally safe for DLC. I'm kind of happy that they're here because I've got a few of them and they're just nice. This is pretty much what you'll be using to flank around. This is your cavalry, essentially. You've got a mounted variant, which we'll speak about in a second, but they're able to do damage. They're very capable if you throw them into hordes of humans and stuff like that, anything that's human-sized. You can also buff them up, which isn't too bad. I personally like the unit, I must say. You can recruit them fairly early into your campaign as soon as it starts ticking over, and yeah, they do damage. Keep in mind that a lot of stuff that you'll be fighting against, especially where his starting position is either going to be Tzeentchian or Cathayan or, something just human-sized. Of course, if you start moving towards the Mountains of Morn, you're going to have a bad time as they're not so good with dealing with monstrous units, but they are more than capable of taking out all the Kislevite stuff if you decide to just cross the ocean, as there's only just a small river apart from you and Kislev. Definitely a war beast which, is done pretty well considering, because a lot of war beasts aren't really that good. The mounted variant is just the stronger version, but you can get them in the form of Pox Riders. Now, it doesn't really do much barring just a boost towards the stats and so on, and yeah, it's just like a higher tier version of the original Toads. You're going to be able to do quite a lot of damage with these. I like the fact that it's also not the exact same skin. They've done a little bit of a reskin, some changes to the textures and so on, so it looks like it's a different type of Toad, which I know it doesn't mean a lot to most, but visually it's just nice, so it's not just a big copy pasta. I honestly have a little complaint about the unit myself, mainly for functionality reasons. It would have been nice if they would have had access to death heads to be able to throw a little bit of a ranged weapon before getting into combat. Like, that's my only real complaint. I like the Toads. I think they're really strong. I think they're usable in loads of different cases for your campaign. But having this as a stronger version, it would have just been nice to be able to throw a few, like just one or two shots would be nice. It's really all that was needed, just to give a little bit of strength to a unit which, yeah, it got a buff bonus with stats, but that's pretty much it. It didn't really get anything else in terms of, like, abilities or anything. I imagine it's because of animation issues and so on. I mean, it would be a bit difficult to animate because they're jumping up and down on the Toads, but that's pretty much it. I think that would have made the Plague Toads with the Pox Riders on it a lot stronger. Next we got the Great Unclean One, which is the monster version. You can actually have a doom stack of these big boys, and believe me, they can be a little bit cheaper, especially with Korgoth, as he can reduce their upkeep even further. Now, what are these guys? Well, they are big tanky monsters that can take a punch, but they can punch back too. They're able to cast spells too, and you can get more spells with them. I personally think that this is a great addition. Now, keep in mind that it's going to be a while before you're able to recruit these, considering that obviously the Nurgle mechanics are a bit different when it comes to recruitment, and obviously you're going to need a rather strong economy, but I have a Exalted Great Unclean One at the moment running around with 19 other Great Unclean Ones, and they're rampaging across Altdorf and the rest of the Empire, having the time of their lives, in all honesty, and I think it's kind of funny. I love the idea of it. It's a little powerful. Like, yeah, they are strong, but they're meant to be. These are supposed to be the tankiest of tanky demons. All in all, no complaints whatsoever, just very expensive, and I do not know how to save money, so my treasury is really feeling it. Okay, and now we can start looking towards the Soul Grinder of Nurgle. Plague Hulk. Sorry, what was that? No, it's not a Forge World mini, it's not from 40k. Anyways, despite where they took the model from, the Soul Grind of Nurgle is pretty interesting, mainly because obviously it's got its own unique model, which is nice considering, well, it's Nurgle, you expect them to be big and fat. But it's also a rather viable artillery piece with a decently long range, a decent amount of ammo too. It's pretty good. I'd say it's more on the lines of you can shoot from a distance or start getting closer and then start doing some damage on melee, because it is a proper hybrid unit, and this can do damage. You know, it's anti-infantry, it's armor piercing, it's armored too, it causes terror. It's a big boy, and it's able to do a lot of damage. The funny thing is they're also really fast too, because 75 speed is really good for Nurgle. So you just imagine something like this charging right at you. I imagine that this could be a pretty interesting doom stack. I must try this out at one point. But all in all, really good monster. It's able to do a lot of damage. It's durable, which is very important. Because, like, the last thing you want is being able to recruit these and then having it sniped off by, I don't know, Tzeentchian forces or something. It's, again, really important. I have to keep stressing it. It's a very strange way to recruit, and you want to be able to have these as much as possible. Chaos Furies of Nurgle. Okay, so you guys are going to get shocked, but I'm actually going to complement these as a very early unit. Keep in mind that, right, your army's slow, let's be very honest there. And the Chaos Furies themselves, you know, 110 speed is pretty good. Considering that you're going to get them quite early on, you could start getting them and, you know, flank or rear charge your enemies, pick out any stragglers. This is probably the highest praise I'm ever going to give any Chaos Furies, and it's because Nurgle desperately needs some speed early on, so these are going to be quite useful for you, but they're still squishy. Mind you, they're not that squishy when it comes to this. They do get the Nurgle buff, which makes them more viable in melee combat with the extra melee defense, but yeah, I mean, they're not bad, they're not horrible, but they're not bad when it comes to Nurgle at the very least, and hopefully this is the last time I have to compliment a bloody Chaos Fury. Sorry, it's just they were universally useless on the tabletop, and funny enough, they've got some uses here. You will replace them pretty quickly though with Rotflies. These are your monstrous flying war beasts. They're pretty fast, still at 90 speed isn't bad. They're very tanky, very durable. They fly around, like, they kind of dance around in unison, which is weird. I've never really noticed this until now. Either way, they are pretty good. I like them. I think they're pretty good. You can only really get them through one of the cycles, though, as everything else kind of gives you a mounted variant, which we'll talk about just soon. But even unmounted, I'd say that they're very much worth it. They can do a lot of damage. And I wouldn't have to say that they're just there for flanking and rear charges, because, yeah, up front, you know, just throw them in. They're giant flies which are armored with pretty strong chitin. They're able to do their job. They've also got armor-piercing damage too, which you'll notice is quite a bit of a theme, which, yeah, is extremely useful, especially for a flying war beast. The first upgraded version is the Plague Drones, and you're going to want to start replacing the Rotflies with these, mainly because, you know, poison attacks. You want those extra benefits when you're starting to fight with your enemies, and yeah, it's pretty good. It's a few extra bonuses to stats too, nothing too drastic, but it does help, and I've noticed them to be quite useful. Obviously, poison attacks and armor piercing and all that, you know, always very helpful. The more stuff that you can stack up against your enemies, especially since you're going to be getting a lot of hits prior, the better. And keep in mind, obviously, these are your fast-moving stuff, so you're probably going to want to keep them hidden around and then bring them out. It very much depends on how your playstyle is. It is very possible to have, say, for example, 18 Plague Drones of Nurgle, or better yet said, 17 with one Herald on a Rotfly and a Plague Bringer on a Rotfly too, and then one unit of Nurglings hidden away, so you can just have this massive army of flying monstrosities. It's fun. I don't know how viable that would be, but it sounds like a lot of fun. And they become far more useful when you upgrade them to the Death Head variant. So yeah, this is the final cycle for them. It's going to take a while before you can start recruiting them. And there's no stat changes, barring just adding in a small range weapon with 70 range. You get a very small amount of ammunition, but it does do a lot of damage. And the fact is that it makes the Plague Drones so much more versatile, like so much more. Just the Death Heads add so much more versatility, it's unreal, and it makes them a lot more viable. It's the same thing, if the Toads would have had these too, it would have been fantastic, because they add in a bit more damage, especially with a faction that you don't have really any range, so short range kind of does help. It's limited ammunition, so you're not going to be able to just cheese this, but you will have enough to be able to do some damage. Cycle charging with these is also very viable, and just being able to do damage in general. Plus the fact that they're very high speed too is pretty good. You have to keep in mind that this is probably the fastest stuff that you're going to have, barring the Furies. So we can start looking towards heroes now, and I might have to be a little bit negative about this one. You see, the Cultist of Nurgle is your support hero in a sense. It's able to summon in some demons, and some powerful ones in campaign and so on. It's got some decent debuffs, but the thing is, it's so squishy. Despite the fact that it has poison attacks and so on, it's so squishy, it's going to be slaughtered really quick if you can't bring it in. And the thing is that it is a melee hero. You're going to want it close to the battlefield, and that means that it can get sniped out. I don't see the point. Don't get me wrong, I like it on a Chaos Steed and so on, but I can't really justify using it too much. It's better off just going around spreading plague more than anything else, whereas I've seen the cultists of all the other factions being much more viable, having a lot more uses. This one's just kind of stuck there for me as, if I need to use it, I need to, but I don't really want to. The Plague Ridden, on the other hand, are much more viable, as they're spellcasters, but they're also very tanky. They can either have the Law of Death or the Law of Nurgle. You can have them on foot. You can have them very decently armored on a Palanquin of Nurgle, or if you want them to take to the skies, you can do that too with a Rotfly. It's just so much better, plus having magic is better. The fact is that it kind of runs circles around in terms of stats or pretty much uses to the Cultist. The Law of Nurgle is quite destructive, the Law of Death is really good too, we've all known that since Warhammer 1, so I would say that this is the go-to. This is pretty much something that you can use around. They've got multiple different things like the Locust and so on, so you can be able to, well, mix and match as you please. I have personally liked them with the Palanquin, as I think that they work really well as a slow-moving tank, because they'll be moving with a slow-moving army. But on the Rotfly is perfectly fine too, if you want them quick to move around, zoom across the battlefield and cast spells. Plus, it's also quite durable on the Rotfly too, so you don't have to really worry too much, unless you're getting aimed by, like, say, anything with a lot of guns, like Strepsy and so on. That will cause a few issues. Obviously, we can talk about the Herald of Nurgle, which is your generic Lord option, same mount options as the Plague Ridden, same magic law options, which is obviously Death and Nurgle. They are pretty good. Keep in mind that they're the generic ones, so you're going to be recruiting them one by one from this anyway. I would say that it really depends. The thing is that you can make them very highly mobile with the flying. But if you're going to have them on foot, moving with an army and so on, you're better off just upgrading them. It very much depends on how your playstyle has been with your generic lord and how the army has been centered around him. So on foot is kind of pointless. The Palanquin at that point is kind of pointless too, because yeah, it makes them more tanky and so on. But if you want to make them tanky, the Great Exalted and Clean one is the best way to go. If you want them mobile, which works if you want just an army of flies, or if you want to be able to cast spells, go for the Rotfly. It's just depending on you. At this point, it's depending on you. Okay, and lastly, we have the Exalted Lord choice, which is the Exalted Great Unclean one. These are really good. If you're wanting to go for a slow-moving army, but then again, it can move decently quick, well, for Nurgle standards, it really much depends. These are very powerful. You can tell by its stats. You know, it's there to do damage. It's also a spellcaster. You can have them with the Law of Death or the Law of Nurgle. I mean, these you can't go wrong with. I absolutely love them. I love them on the tabletop too. They're just really cool. I mean, it's a giant wall of flesh, and that's how your army's premise is going to go, so why not the biggest dude with the biggest moves? So we don't really have to talk about it much, because I think I've given it enough compliments. This is the thing with Nurgle, and this is pretty much where I'll see the end of it. The fact is that you have to try and justify every unit's battle capabilities with Nurgle's roster, instead of, say, with like Khorne, where I could say, yeah, you don't really need to recruit these, don't bother, and so on. They are coming to you in such a weird way through the recruitment style that you're going to want to try and see every use. It kind of makes sense in a way when you think about it lore-wise, because, you know, Papa Nurgle loves you, he loves all his creations and so on, so you're going to have to try and find uses for everything, and it's not too bad, I must say. It's doable. I must have taken a long time with this video to write, because I think I'm losing my mind at this point. The outro is usually done without script, because it's just going over everything that we've just discussed, but yeah, I'd say that the roster itself is quite good. It's very different. It's very different. Keep in mind, it's not like the dwarves. Yes, they're slow, but they're heavily armored, and they've got loads and loads of range. This is dwarves, but no armor, no range, but yes, magic. Does that make sense? I think it does. It's a weird comparison, but you get what I mean. Plus, it's also kind of ironic considering that Kulgarth hates dwarves, but yeah. But anyways, with all that being said, let me know what you think about the Nurgle roster. Let me know what you think about the units and so on. I understand that this might have been a confusing video, but hey, it's just going to be that way until you guys get your hands on it and see for yourself, because I've lost my mind. Nurgle's still very fun though. Nurgle's still very fun. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.